For several months, U.S. Border Patrol agents patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border in the San Diego suburb of Otay Mesa had been paying close attention to this suspicious-looking U.S. business along the border.
The news broke with a sharp sense of urgency, leaving countless Americans stunned. The United States government had ordered an immediate shutdown of the California border after authorities stumbled upon a terrifying underground discovery. It was not the type of disruption that came from political disputes, legal debates, or routine enforcement surges. This time, the decision was triggered by something lurking beneath the surface, literally hidden under the ground where very few had thought to look. The closure sent shockwaves through border towns, stunned officials across the nation, and rattled the public imagination in ways that defied simple explanation. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The California-Mexico border has always been a focal point for stories of migration, commerce, and political tension. Yet nothing in its long and complicated history had prepared the region for a full and immediate shutdown of its crossings. Border closures on this scale are rare, reserved only for crises that threaten national security or public safety. This one was different because it wasn't about visible threats moving across highways or ports of entry. It came from beneath the ground, forcing a reevaluation of how vulnerable the border really is. For years, there had been speculation about tunnels, smuggling routes, and subterranean networks. But this discovery went far beyond anything local enforcement had hinted at before. The urgency and secrecy surrounding the announcement made clear that what lay underground was both massive in scale and terrifying in implication. The first reports indicated that officials conducting routine surveillance and inspection in a section near California's southern border stumbled upon anomalies in the soil. At first, the irregular readings seemed consistent with long-rumored smuggling tunnels, the kind used by organized groups to move contraband. But once experts were brought in, the scope of the underground find grew exponentially. What investigators unearthed was not just a tunnel, nor a crude passage. It was a sprawling subterranean system that seemed engineered with precision, extending miles in multiple directions, laced with chambers, corridors, and structures that should not have been possible in secret. This was not the work of small groups with shovels and determination. The architecture pointed to something far more organized, well-funded, and deeply troubling. What made the discovery even more alarming was its proximity to critical infrastructure. The underground system was not merely hidden beneath barren land or desert scrub. It ran dangerously close to key border checkpoints, supply routes, and even civilian areas. Officials quickly realized that such a network could be weaponized, either by allowing the clandestine movement of large groups and materials, or by destabilizing the ground above it. In moments of crisis, even the perception of such vulnerabilities can create national panic. The fact that authorities moved so swiftly to shut down the entire California border underscored that the threat was not just theoretical. Something inside that subterranean system had convinced them that immediate action was necessary. The public narrative grew more unsettling as unofficial leaks trickled out. Some described vast caverns filled with equipment and strange materials. Others claimed there were signs of long-term occupation, as though people had been living and working underground for months, perhaps years, undetected. There were whispers that the underground find stretched deeper than expected, suggesting that parts of the system might have been abandoned while others were still active. The idea that thousands of travelers, trucks, and daily commuters had been passing over such a concealed expanse was chilling. What else could have been operating underfoot, invisible to the naked eye, while life on the surface went on as normal? The implications for national security were immediate and dire. If an underground system of this magnitude could exist right beneath one of the most heavily monitored borders in the world, what did that say about the ability of hostile groups to penetrate or bypass U.S. defenses? The California border was supposed to be fortified with layers of technology, human patrols, and intelligence oversight. Yet here was evidence that something massive had slipped through all those layers, not above ground where everyone was looking, but beneath it. The find raised urgent questions about what other networks might exist elsewhere, concealed beneath border states, waiting to be uncovered. Beyond security, the shutdown carried immense economic and social weight. California's border crossings are lifelines for trade, tourism, and daily labor. Shutting them down was like severing an artery that connected the U.S. and Mexico. Truckloads of goods sat idle, businesses faced delays, and thousands of workers found themselves stranded. While the government framed the decision as necessary for safety, the shock rippled through both countries. Border communities are deeply interdependent, and halting their flow overnight revealed just how fragile those connections can be when threatened by the unknown. Every hour of closure amplified the sense of urgency as people demanded answers about what had been discovered underground. For ordinary citizens, the most frightening aspect was the uncertainty. Was the underground system evidence of advanced criminal operations? Was it tied to cartels, foreign entities, or something even darker? Or was it a decades-old construction that had somehow remained hidden until now? The absence of immediate clarity created a vacuum that filled with speculation. Social media platforms ignited with theories ranging from elaborate smuggling enterprises to hidden military outposts. The very scale of the find allowed imaginations to run wild, and in that environment, fear spread faster than facts. The government's refusal to disclose full details only deepened the unease. People were left to wonder what could be so terrifying that it warranted closing down an entire state border. Law enforcement agencies faced an unprecedented challenge. To investigate the underground system required sending teams into spaces that were potentially unstable, dangerous, and hostile. Every chamber, every corridor held the possibility of collapse, traps, or even armed resistance. Yet they had no choice but to proceed. The safety of millions depended on knowing exactly what lay beneath. Specialized units were deployed, combining geological experts, tactical teams, and intelligence officers. Their task was not only to map the underground system, but to determine who built it, why, and what it was intended for. Each step deeper into the underground was like peeling back a layer of a hidden reality that had been operating parallel to the surface world. The psychological weight of the discovery reverberated far beyond California. Across the United States, people began to question how much of their environment was truly known. The idea of an underground network that's sophisticated was a reminder that human activity often hides beneath the visible world. Tunnels, bunkers, and subterranean structures have long been tools of war, resistance, and crime. But they had rarely been imagined on this scale so close to American soil. The shutdown of the border was not just about containing the immediate threat. It was also about regaining a sense of control over the unseen spaces that lie below. Officials acknowledged privately that the underground discovery would have to be examined with unprecedented scrutiny. Every aspect of it had implications for how the border is managed in the future. If hostile groups could construct such systems undetected, then border security would need to expand in scope from the surface to the subsurface. That shift would require new technologies, new surveillance methods, and new policies that could monitor not only what moves across the ground, but also what moves beneath it. The California shutdown was more than a response to one terrifying find. It was the beginning of a new era in border security, one where the ground itself could no longer be taken for granted as solid and unbreached. At the same time, the human element could not be ignored. For residents of border towns, the shutdown was a harsh reminder of how quickly their lives could be upended by events beyond their control. Families were separated overnight, workers lost access to jobs, and businesses that depended on cross-border trade faced ruinous delays. The underground system may have been invisible, but its consequences were felt immediately in the sunlight above. People who had lived for years in the rhythm of crossing back and forth now faced an indefinite suspension of their routines, all because of a discovery that few had ever imagined was possible. The underground find in California did not just expose a hole in the ground. It exposed a hole in the assumptions about safety, stability, and oversight at the nation's most visible boundary. It forced Americans to confront the unsettling reality that what lies beneath can be as consequential as what lies ahead. And as officials struggled to assess the scope of the threat, the entire country was left watching, waiting, and wondering what terrifying truths might still be hidden in the shadows underfoot. The decision to halt movement at the California border because of the subterranean discovery was more than a logistical maneuver. It was a profound statement about how fragile the illusion of control can be. For decades, the border had been treated as a line on the map, something that could be guarded with fences, cameras, and checkpoints. The new reality proved that a line above the soil meant very little if a hidden network stretched underneath it. That realization alone was enough to unsettle policymakers, defense strategists, and citizens alike. What was once considered a two-dimensional problem, the flow of people and goods across visible land, was suddenly transformed into a three-dimensional crisis where the ground itself could not be trusted. Beyond structural concerns, there was a psychological ripple effect. People began to report feeling uneasy about where they walked, where they drove, and even where they lived. The notion that a vast and unknown system of tunnels lay beneath the surface created an atmosphere of uncertainty. Parents worried about their children playing in fields or parks near the border. Farmers questioned whether their land was truly stable. Residents of small towns wondered whether their homes sat above hollow spaces. The fear was not only about who might use such tunnels, but about whether the ground beneath their feet was as solid as they once believed. The shutdown also had major implications for surveillance and intelligence gathering. For years, border patrols and security agencies had invested heavily in technology designed to monitor what moved across the desert. Motion sensors, drones, thermal cameras, and satellite imagery. These tools were highly effective above ground, but they were nearly blind to what unfolded beneath it. The discovery of the underground system revealed a glaring blind spot in national security. Suddenly, the emphasis shifted toward ground-penetrating radar, seismic monitoring, and advanced subterranean mapping. Agencies scrambled to acquire equipment capable of probing deeper into the earth, while scientists worked to interpret unusual readings that might signal concealed passageways. At the same time, the underground finds sparked international concern. Mexico, sharing the other half of the border, faced pressure to address the sections of the system that extended onto its side. Diplomatic channels buzzed with conversations about joint investigations, liability, and responsibility. For Mexico, the discovery carried its own risks. If the network had indeed been constructed over years or even decades, it raised questions about who had authorized, ignored, or failed to detect it. On both sides of the border, the discovery became not just a security issue, but a diplomatic puzzle that threatened to strain bilateral relations. The sheer scale of the shutdown also brought into focus how interconnected the economies of California and northern Mexico are. Truck convoys lined up for miles, their cargo spoiling in the heat. Factories in Baja California halted production because parts could not cross. Restaurants and small shops in San Diego that relied on daily Mexican customers saw their revenue evaporate overnight. For California's agricultural industry, which depends heavily on cross-border labor, the closure was a devastating blow. Seasonal workers were unable to cross for harvests, and the fear of crops rotting in the fields became a stark reality. The underground find may have been buried in the shadows, but its effects were instantly visible in the collapse of everyday commerce. Social trust was another casualty of the discovery. Communities near the border often rely on informal knowledge, whispers, and local awareness to understand the rhythms of daily life. People know the sounds of patrol helicopters, the rush of traffic at crossing points, and the habits of those who live nearby. Yet the underground network had remained invisible to all of that. Locals who prided themselves on knowing the land were shocked that such an extensive system could exist without their awareness. This failure of local knowledge eroded confidence not just in government agencies, but in the very sense of familiarity that residents had with their environment. The academic world also turned its gaze to the discovery, eager to analyze its construction, purpose, and implications. Anthropologists speculated about whether it was tied to cultural or historic practices of underground building, or whether it represented a new phase of transnational ingenuity. Geologists were intrigued by how such an extensive structure could be dug without triggering collapses or being noticed by seismic monitors. Political scientists examined how the find would influence border policy, while criminologists debated whether this was evidence of organized cartel activity or something more complex. The underground system became a case study that spanned multiple fields, each discipline adding new layers of interpretation and urgency. The decision to shut down the border entirely also reflected the gravity of what investigators feared might still be undiscovered. It was not enough to simply cordon off the area where the tunnels had been found. Authorities had to assume that the network might extend in unpredictable directions, perhaps linking to other hidden entry points or stretching toward urban centers. The shutdown in this sense was both preventative and symbolic. It told the world that the United States would rather endure the disruption of a halted border than risk leaving its citizens exposed to a threat that emerged from below. Public reaction within California varied from anxious curiosity to outright panic. For those living hundreds of miles from the border, the event seemed almost surreal, like a plot from a thriller film brought into reality. But for border residents, it was deeply personal. Their routines, livelihoods, and sense of safety were all upended. Community meetings filled with tense questions. How long would the border be closed? Was it safe to stay in their homes? Would their property values collapse if it turned out that tunnels ran beneath their neighborhoods? Each question underscored the fact that the discovery was not an isolated oddity, but a transformative event that would shape their lives for years to come. At the federal level, lawmakers quickly seized on the moment to argue for sweeping changes in border policy. Some called for massive investments in subterranean surveillance, suggesting that billions be spent on technology capable of detecting underground anomalies. Others argued for rethinking border strategy entirely, shifting resources away from walls and surface patrols toward a more comprehensive approach that recognized the full complexity of border terrain. The discovery gave ammunition to voices across the political spectrum, each framing the find as proof of their long-standing positions. What united them all was the recognition that the border was more porous and more complex than anyone had publicly admitted. Meanwhile, the human imagination filled in the gaps left by official silence. Speculation ranged from vast drug smuggling empires to foreign operatives using the underground system as staging grounds. Some even whispered about archaeological discoveries, hinting that the system might not be entirely modern. Without clear information, rumors took on lives of their own, spreading through social networks, radio shows, and whispered conversations in cafes and workplaces. The terrifying aspect was not simply the tunnels themselves, but the unknown intentions behind them. Until authorities revealed more, every possibility seemed both plausible and alarming. For the media, the shutdown was an irresistible story, combining elements of mystery, danger, and national security. Reporters swarmed the area, trying to capture footage of closed checkpoints, long lines of waiting vehicles, and frustrated travelers. Helicopters hovered overhead, filming landscapes where the invisible drama beneath the soil was unfolding. Yet even the media struggled to keep up with the enormity of the discovery. Without access to the underground system, they were left to speculate based on scraps of information, further feeding the cycle of curiosity and dread. From a broader historical perspective, the event echoed ancient fears of what lies beneath. Human societies have long been fascinated and unsettled by underground spaces. From catacombs to hidden bunkers, subterranean worlds have always carried an aura of mystery and danger. The California find tapped into this deep-seated cultural unease. It was not just about physical tunnels. It was about the symbolic intrusion of the unseen into the realm of the known. By forcing an entire state border to close, the discovery reminded everyone that the hidden world can erupt into the visible one with staggering consequences. Strategists warned that the discovery was likely only the beginning. If one such system could be built, then others might already exist in undiscovered locations. The California find became a wake-up call for every border state. Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas suddenly found themselves under pressure to examine their own landscapes more carefully. The ripple effect of one shutdown in California was a broader sense of vulnerability across the entire southern United States. Each state braced for the possibility that their own ground might conceal similar networks waiting to be uncovered. The event also had cultural ramifications. Artists, writers, and filmmakers began to seize on the imagery of hidden networks, reflecting society's anxieties in their work. The underground find became a metaphor for the hidden forces that shape society, unseen until they break through in dramatic fashion. It became a cultural touchstone, a shorthand for secrets lurking beneath the surface. In this way, the terrifying discovery at the California border did not just alter policy or security. It altered imagination itself. reshaping how people thought about the spaces they inhabit. Perhaps the most enduring impact of the discovery was its ability to collapse the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary. What began as routine border surveillance ended with an event so large it shut down one of the busiest crossings in the world. It showed that beneath everyday routines, commuting, trading, farming, living, there can exist vast, hidden realities with the power to disrupt everything. This realization was both humbling and frightening. It reminded the public that the surface world is only part of the story. Whatever else came of it, the shutdown had already left a permanent mark on the American consciousness. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on California border shutdown after terrifying underground find? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.